But would you please give Pastor Mike and Sharon Lyons a great big God bless you as they come. We're excited to receive from you. I love their shirts. Misty, we need to get a picture of them once they get up there if we can.
I always hated dead time when we pastored a church and whoever the guest was took too long to stand up there. This one's on. Let's see if we can fit in these things. I don't know if they go low enough for us. Oh, there. Oh, look at there.
Is this on?
Here, I'll give you
take
that one. Well, it is a great privilege to be here. We are so blessed that Pastor Rhonda invited us to be here. As she said, we got to know your husband through Dave Bishop. He came out and spoke out there in Yakima, and then Pastor Bishop came back here and spoke, and we got to know him there at that time. And then we moved here. Well, we'll get into when we moved here. But anyhow, thank you for allowing us to be here. You're very gracious, and we appreciate each one of you being here. We're going to take probably about 10 minutes and give a little history, because I know when somebody steps up, you go, who are they? Where'd they come from? Do they know what they're talking about at all? And we don't know who we are. We don't know what we're talking about, but we've got an hour to try to figure it out. So we appreciate being able to be here and share what's going on in our lives, what God is doing, and stories. We've got lots of great stories we'll share with you. But I'm going to let my wife share a little bit about our history with the bishops, and I'm going to enjoy this chair. Never had one of these.
Thank you. I also want to say thank you to Pastor Rhonda, and you guys are just so gracious. I love the way you walked up to us in the lobby and made us feel so welcome. So thank you very much. I wanted to give you a little bit of history. I was 19 years old. I was born and raised in Yakima, Washington, and I was 19 years old when the bishops came to be my pastors. And 1 week after they arrived, I went into Pastor Bishop's office and I said, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And I just poured my heart out to him. And he says, well, Sandy's going to Mexico City next week. Do you want to go? And I thought, what in the world has that got to do with my life? It had everything to do with it. And I am so thankful for that trip. I knew that God had called me to marry a pastor when I was 17, and I didn't know any pastors. And so I thought, how do you make this happen? And I thought, I had never told anybody because I thought they'll think I'm crazy, and I didn't want to come across as crazy. So as Sandy and I were driving down the road, I think it was somewhere around Salt Lake City, and we'd talked all night long on that drive. And I finally thought, okay, I think I can trust her enough to tell her what I think God said to me. And I said, Sandy, don't think I'm crazy, but I think God has called me to marry a pastor. And do you think that's possible for somebody to get called to marry a pastor when they don't actually know anybody? And she smiled and she said, Sharon, God called me to marry a pastor who would be a widower with 2 children. And if you know their story, Pastor Bishop's first wife was killed in a car accident, and he had 2 children, Cheryl and Shannon. And from that moment on, she was my hero and my model, and I needed anything, I would call her. It didn't matter where in the world I was, and sometimes I was a long ways away. But she was my mentor until the day that she died. And I miss her every day. Amen. I miss her every day. I want to tell you a little bit about our ministry journey, because when we got married, Mike still had a year left in Bible college, and we were at West Coast Bible College.
And I didn't think I was going to be a pastor.
No, he absolutely insisted he was not going to be a pastor.
She hounded me for a couple of years on that, and I said, no, forget it. And then
well, I knew he was the guy, So I was certain he was going to be a pastor. But when we got married, it was 1976, and very shortly after that, Mike finished up his last year of Bible college, and we really weren't sure what we were going to do. And my cousin was speaking at a Youth with a Mission outreach in Sunland, California, or somewhere down there. I think they called it Sunfest or something like that. And so we went, not having a clue what God was going to be doing with us. And in that week-long, it was kind of
Christian festival.
It was Christian music festival. And,
Christian version of Woodstock.
and when my cousin spoke, Mike looked at me and said, I want to go with him. And we ended up going to Holland to work with my cousin, Floyd McClung Jr. And when we got there, I didn't want to go. To be honest with you, I didn't want to be in rebellion to what God was saying to us, but I really wanted to be in Yakima. And that's all I wanted my whole life, just to be in Yakima and raise a family there. And here I am all the way across the world in Holland. And 1 week after we got there, I found out I was pregnant. Well, I wanted to go home. I mean, that is the honest truth. And I begged, I pleaded, I cried, I did everything I could do to get my husband to leave.
Had to give away our return tickets.
Yeah, true. This is true. I had return tickets. Back then you could get an open-ended ticket. And every time I opened my dresser drawer to get dressed in the morning, there would be those tickets staring at me. And I knew, I could use them. And he wouldn't miss me that much. And finally the Lord spoke to me and he said, Sharon, you're going to have to give those tickets away. And that was my security, because I always knew I could get out of there if I had to. And God spoke to me to give those tickets away. So I went to Mike and I said, Mike, I really believe the Lord said that I'm going to sin if I don't give those tickets away. And so we prayed and asked the Lord, who do we give those tickets to? And he just really kind of focused our attention on a couple that lived there. And so this is hard. Oh, it was hard for me. I mean, you want to hold on to something and you can't. And it's like God has to pry your fingers off whatever you're going to have to give away. And we walked up to this couple, and their names were Mike and Carol Saya. And I took a deep breath, and Mike said, Mike, we have something for you. The Lord really has told us that we need to give you this. And I'm just, okay, I'll do it. And we gave those tickets to them, and they looked down. It was a one-way ticket to Seattle. And they said, we've been praying for tickets to Seattle. Wow. God began to teach me about living by faith. That's so good. And so we made an agreement, a stupid agreement. We decided we weren't going to write any letters of support. We were going to just pray and ask God to provide for our needs. Really dumb idea, but God was in it. And so the whole time...
Wait, can you have a dumb idea that God is in?
Yeah, you can. You can have it. What feels like a dumb idea, but God is in it. And so for 2 years that we lived there, we prayed about everything that we needed, every penny that would come in. And God supplied enough money. We went to 15 countries. And I'm going to tell you about a couple of those. I want to get briefly so he can get into what he wants to say. But the first thing I want to share is when we didn't have money and our baby was born and we didn't have a dime to our name, and I mean literally, didn't have a dime to our name, and our son, I cry every time I tell his story, our son needed baby socks, and we didn't have the money for baby socks, and I was getting upset with God. And I don't know if you've ever gotten upset with God because he was slow in doing something or you didn't understand what he was doing. But I was kind of mad. And I knew I didn't want to be mad at God, but I didn't know what to do with it. And so there was a girl there that lived, we called it the farm. It was, we lived on an old farm in a village outside of the village was here to Holland. And I went to this girl because she was Corrie ten Boom's former companion. And I thought, if anybody can help me, it's somebody like her. So her name was Romke. So I said, Romke, I really need to talk to you. And she said, well, okay, what about? And I said, I'm really mad at God. And she said, you're mad at God? And I said, we need baby socks. And we don't have the money. And I don't understand. We came all the way over here to follow what we felt like was God's will for our lives. And and we don't have the money. I don't think God's living up to his end of the bargain. And I said, I need your help. And she said, wow, I don't get it either. And I thought, that's your help? And I went home and I felt honestly more depressed than, have you ever gone to talk to somebody and you ended up feeling worse than when you went? And the next morning, there's a knock at my door. And here stood Ramke. And she said, Sharon, you're never going to believe what's happened. And I said, well, try me. And she said, well, there's a group of Dutch ladies that live in the village. And every time they get together, they knit. And they pray before they knit. And they ask God, what shall we knit? And this morning they prayed. This is where I started to cry. Because the Lord told them, make a pair of baby socks. Take them to Ramke, and she will know who needs them. And these are the baby socks. So God taught me that I can trust him. It was a boy, and he was very big. He's now 6'8", and they fit exactly on his feet. So God knew exactly where I was, what I needed, and he could have given me the money, but that wasn't the point. He wanted me to develop in my faith and in my trust of him. So it's been a journey. A few months after that, I think Joel was 2 months old, and Mike had to go to the YWAM office for a few minutes, and he was supposed to be right back. But he was gone forever, and I couldn't imagine what happened. And when he finally came in, it was about an hour later, and he said, Sharon, he was real quiet. He said, Sharon, a call came into the office while I was over there. There's an organization here in Holland. They have a smuggling van. This is bad news for me because I know he's going to say we need to do something. And he said they have a smuggling van, and they want us to take Bibles to a pastor in Romania who spent 7 years in prison for religious activities. And my response to him was, you're nuts. I said, you can't be serious. We got a 2-month-old baby. What are you thinking? And he said, well, Sharon, he said, would you be willing to pray? Oh, that irritated me. I thought, you can't say no and be spiritual, you know. So I said, yeah, but don't get your hopes up because I know God, he agrees with me already. And so we knelt down to pray, and we asked the Lord if he wanted us to go. And, you know, have you ever been so stubborn that God's trying to speak, but you don't want to hear it? Amen. And so as soon as we finished praying, Mike said, Sharon, I feel like God's saying we're to go. And I said, yeah, and I think that's what you want to hear. No. I'm telling you, Mike, God agrees with me. That's crazy. He said, well, would you pray by yourself? And I said, yeah, but don't get your hopes up. I'm telling you, he agrees with me. This is irresponsible. We've got a 2-month-old. We can't just go and do something like that. So the next morning, I got up, and I said, Lord, I had my Bible. I put my Bible there next to me. I knelt down. I said, Lord, I know this is crazy. And I know in my heart, I just know you already agree with me. But I told Mike I'd pray. And so I'm going to do what I said. I'm going to ask if you want us to go. And as I'm praying, my Bible was open. And I heard myself saying, Lord, I'd have to know that if we go, we'll come back. And I looked down at my Bible, and I've never had this happen before or since. But the verse lit up on fire, and it jumped up off the page, and it said, therefore the redeemed of the Lord will return and come with singing unto Zion. Yeah, but I'm stubborn. And I said, what a coincidence of all the verses in the Bible. And I said, Lord, I said, you don't understand. Those people will put us in jail. And he said, who are you? The next verse, lights up, comes up off the page in fire. He said, who are you that you're afraid of a man who will die? And you have forgotten the Lord your maker. I'm still stubborn. I said, I'm having this argument with God, and you never win when you argue with God. But I said, but Lord, you don't understand. They will put us in prison. And the next verse lights up, comes up off the page. You will not die in the dungeon. nor will your bread be lacking. And I said, you agree with him. So when Mike came in, he said, did you pray? And I said, yes. He said, well, I said, God agrees with you. And we're supposed to go. And that was the most remarkable trip. It was scary, but I saw God move in that trip. I was so privileged to stand next to a pastor who had spent so much time in prison because he loved Jesus. And those are memories that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. And I'm so thankful that God put up with my stubbornness and he understood my fear. And a lot of times God knows who we are. He knows our hearts, that we want to go, we want to do what he wants, but he also knows we're scared. And he knows how to mold our hearts into something that's pliable so he can do what he wants with us. So, Mike, you take it.
That was a lot more than you had in that little paragraph. We could tell stories all night long. We just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of who we are before we talk a little bit more about the chaplaincy ministry. But also, I'll tell one on us. While we were there in Holland, we went down and worked 6 weeks in Algeria. And our job in Algeria with Youth of the Mission was to rebuild the only Bible bookstore in the whole nation that had been closed down like 7 or 8 years before because they had a Bible in the Kabyle language. In the Kabyle language, the overthrow of the government, they banned that language so people wouldn't revolt. So you couldn't speak in Kabyle, you couldn't write in Kabyle, and the Bible bookstore had been closed down. Well, it was about 7 or 8 years later, they told us we could rebuild it. We're inside this little itty bitty, if you've ever been to the Middle East, it's a garage door width wide, about 100 foot, not 100 feet, 80 foot long place, and it's full of Bibles and books and junk. It's got dust all over it, and we're rebuilding it. In the back room, I found this trunk back there, and I opened the trunk, and in the trunk were printing plates, and they were the printing plates for the Kabyle language, Kabyle Bible, which was forbidden. And because we'd worked with Brother Andrew's group and smuggled those Bibles into Romania, we got on the phone and called them and said, we've got some printing plates here for the Kabyle Bible. And they said, we just happen to have a van in northern Africa right now. We'll send it by and pick up the plates. So the van came, we loaded these plates, because the Kabyle language was still forbidden. We loaded the plates in this van, and the van drove off, and it left, and we went about what we were doing. How many years later?
15 years.
15 years later, we're living in Southern California, and some friends of ours flew back from Japan as missionaries, and we went out to El Gato Gordo in Upland, California, a Mexican restaurant, and we're sharing stories. They're just telling about Japan, and we're talking about stories, and a guy at another table stood up, his name was Norm Brinkley, said, I couldn't help but overhear you. Now, this is a random restaurant in Southern California 15 years later from when we got those plates. He said, I couldn't help but overhear what you guys were saying. He said, I'm Norm Brinkley. I'm with Operation Mobilization. I said, oh, he said, over the Middle East. I said, oh, we were in Algeria. He said, oh, who'd you work with? We said, Jerry Brittenden. He said, oh, I know Jerry Brittenden. And we told him the story of the plates, the printing plates, and his eyes got big. He said, you want to know the rest of the story? And he said that those plates had come to what country?
They'd gone to Spain.
They went to Spain, and he was put in charge of printing the Bibles and smuggling them back into Algeria. He had no idea where the plates came from, and we had no idea where the plates ended up. And 15 years later, God arranged this thing where we met. And then it was about 2 weeks later, we found out there was a revival going on with the Kabyle tribe in Algiers. And we thought, wow, this is cool. So we moved from Holland, we moved to Maui to start a house ministry. We lived in the town of Lyon that burned to the ground last September or August, September. We lived there for a couple of years, and then we went back. I won't get you stuck with all of it, but we interned with Pastor Bishop years later. We were on staff with him. And then we pioneered a church in Yakima. A little over 20 years ago, we were there for 18 years and pastored a church in Yakima, and we had done extensive missions work. We'd taught in Egypt, we taught in India, taught in Africa, different places, in I don't know how many countries. She could tell you how many countries we've been to, but we'd done that a lot. And we had a son that was a missionary in the Middle East, and we spent time with him working with Syrian refugees, and we just thought, you know what? It's time to step down from our pastorate to do more in missions. It wasn't retire and quit doing ministry. It was we're going to shift gears. Our church had grown to about 300 people. The church was doing good. Everything was paid for. Everything was good, but we left to do more mission stuff. Moved back here about 6 years ago. We're here for about 8 months and made our first trip to Africa, and that was when COVID officially hit. And when we got back from Africa, the next day was when President Trump closed all international flights from coming in. So our dream of doing missions got COVIDized. And about, I don't know, something like 8 months later, maybe a year later, we went back to, this is Ivory Coast in Africa. And that time I didn't think we were going to get out of the country either. And that was one of the funniest. They did some funny things. I mean, COVID made everybody weird. I mean, you know this. So we're guest speakers. We're with some other people from here in Cleveland. And we arrive at churches because we're going to pray for the sick. And they issued us rubber gloves so we wouldn't pass germs from person to person. Now, we're praying for sick people, but we better not pass any germs. And they assigned an usher to each one of us that had a spray alcohol bottle. So as soon as I got done praying for you, I'd hold my hands out. They'd spray my hands, sanitize my hands, and I'd pray for the next person. I thought this is a strange world we're in, and COVID did strange things. So we moved here with the idea of doing more missions and doing that. And then, like I said, COVID hit. We after our second trip to Africa, I thought, I am not, and we'd gone to Israel and different places, and I just thought, I do not want to do international travel till this thing is said and done. I mean, I thought we were going to end up in Africa the last time there. I got exposed. I was more concerned about having COVID at the test site in Africa than I was for the 2 years before. I mean, it was all crazy. So we thought, great. Our plan, we stepped down from our church to do more ministry. Ministry internationally has been shut down. And it was in, I think, 2021 that the tornado hit in Mayfield, Kentucky. And that's where the candle factory was destroyed. The town was about wiped off the planet. And we had an RV. And I said, Sharon, let's just hop in the RV. Let's go over there. I'm sure there's a lot of flat parking lots with no buildings where we can park. And let's just help. Let's just do something. Because, you know, we're pastors at heart. We've been pastoring. We care for people. We love helping people. And I thought, these people are hurting, and we've got nothing to do. We're sitting here twiddling our thumbs. We can't go international. We can go to Kentucky. We can do that. Well, before we actually hopped in our RV to leave, a friend of ours, Pastor, you probably know Larry Cochran, Pastor Larry. Yeah, they're friends of ours. We said, hey, you want to go with us? And they were thinking about it. And then they said, well, Billy Graham has their rapid response chaplain ministry. We said, well, what's that? And we looked it up and said, that's cool because they're recognized by FEMA and Red Cross and all these different places. And when you go there they let you, I had to get permission, by the way. I had to call the headquarters to get permission to wear my blue shirt here tonight. We wear these on deployment only. These are not, they don't, you know, they take it very, very seriously. But my wife, I think, is going to talk about some of the training.
You want me to do that right now?
Well, you could.
Okay.
So anyhow, we went through the training to become chaplains and have been officially accepted.
About 25, 26, 27 years ago.
It wasn't that long ago we started the chaplain training.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, it was?
It was, I know.
Okay.
So we had come back to go through the seminary to work on getting our master's degrees. And they offered a class at the seminary on being a chaplain. And so I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And we took it. And in the class, they had 3 days on critical incident stress and how to debrief somebody when they are in a trauma. And that something lit up on the inside of me. It was like, I see people constantly who are traumatized, and I haven't had the tools to know how to help them. And so that really did something in my heart. And when we went back to Yakima and started the church there, we found out that the same guy that did the training here was going to be doing the same training in Washington. And I thought, boy, I one time through is not enough. I want to really get this stuff. And so I went again, and I went the next year, did it again. And then the hospital chaplain called me, and she said, Sharon, I want you to consider something. We're going to have another training for the hospital here in Yakima. Would you go through the training? And I'm thinking, again? But I said, yeah, I will. And so I went through the training, and then she approached me and said, would you help us and serve as our critical incident debriefing staff at the hospital? So we did all kinds of things. Somebody walked in and committed suicide, babies that died, things like that. And I saw so much that this training helped. And then when we became chaplains with Billy Graham, they required it again. I've now gone through it 7 times. And every time I take something new away with me. It is really, really good training. And it's the ICISF, International Critical Incident Stress Management Organization, and they have classes all over that you can take. And so we've gotten certified as chaplains. We have gone through that training, like I said, 7 times, and it has been phenomenal to help people that are traumatized. I use it constantly. So I can't speak enough about that. If you guys have that inkling that you want to do that, I would highly recommend you get the training.
Yeah, the Billy Graham Association they have extensive training, and for any of you that might be interested in being a chaplain with them, you don't have to have a pastoral background, you have to have a heart that cares.
And we had a question right over here.
Oh, yeah.
I was just saying I was interested because that used to be my big dream of being a child trauma therapist.
Oh.
Well, if you go to the Billy Graham website, just billygraham.org, if you type Billy Graham, you'll get all kinds of stuff. There's chaplaincy, there's training classes. They have some of the critical incident stress classes that are free, some of them that cost. But yeah, just when I do a Google search, but if you go through the Billy Graham Association, they offer a lot of it. And if you're interested in becoming a chaplain, like I said, you don't have to, well, I'll talk more about what we do as chaplains and then how you can get involved with it. So where are we on this sheet? Any idea?
I think you're on the next page.
You think on the next page?
Yeah, I think so.
I think we're, okay, yep, we're on the next page. We made some notes just so we wouldn't just ramble like I'm doing right now. So let me go ahead and start these slides. These are different pictures that we've taken when we go on deployment. This that you're looking at, that's what I always thought having trees around your house when there was a tornado was a good thing because they would protect you. As you see, that house was cut in half by a tree. This is down in Griffin, Georgia. This, I believe, is down in Fort Myers, Florida, from hurricanes. So what happens is a chaplain, we get an email. We're deploying to Fort Myers. We're deploying to Griffin, Georgia. We just got back from Lewiston, Texas, and they ask you if you're interested. Sign up. So when we go, our first responsibility, first and foremost, is to the Samaritan's Purse workers. And you'll see pictures of the workers here. The Billy Graham Association, the Rapid Response Chaplains, work in hand with Samaritan's Purse. Samaritan's Purse in these pictures will be the people in the orange shirts. The orange shirts are the ones that do all the heavy lifting. This is, by the way, these are these nice bunch of yachts down in Fort Myers that, they were piled up thick and deep. The orange shirts, the Samaritan's Purse people, they put tarps on the roof, they cut the trees off, they remove the rubble, in a flood, they go in and take all of your wet stuff out of your house. They'll cut the sheetrock up halfway on the wall. And that's all volunteer work, and as you'll see in these pictures, any age. When we were down in Texas here recently, I think there was one team that everybody was over 65, and they're doing the work. So you can do that. That's mud that you're seeing a picture of. That's how much mud was in some of the people's houses. So they call it mudding out. So they do the cleaning, and then as chaplains, our job is to go in and minister to the Samaritan's Purse people, because they're all volunteers, and some of those aren't born-again Christians. Some of them are people that just want to help. They're people that said, there's a disaster, I want to go do something. And so when we go, we stay, typically they'll find some church. We stay in a Sunday school room. I'm in one Sunday school room on a cot with my sleeping bag. She's in another Sunday school room with the ladies in a cot. This is up in Kentucky. That's what happened to the fire truck. It ended up down in the river. but we stay in separate rooms, but with the Samaritan's Purse workers. So a chaplain, after our day job, so to speak, of working with the homeowners, at nighttime we're there talking to the people if they have any needs, if they need prayer, or if they all want to go to sleep. Typically people go to sleep about 8:30 at night because they get up at 6 and they work all day. Whenever you see these pictures with piles of stuff, that's what happens in a flood. In floods, anything that got wet gets thrown out. Your refrigerator. Down there in Fort Myers, I think I saw 3 pianos out at the street because there's mold, there's sewage, there's all kinds of stuff. All your kitchen appliances go. Your washer, your dryer, your refrigerator, your cabinets all get ripped out. All your furniture goes out. Your china hutch gets ripped out. You can pull the china out and wash it if you want. Then these pictures are how they set up the camp. Now, like I said, we go to a church. Well, if the church doesn't have bathrooms, that's a bathroom trailer that the Samaritan's Purse pulls up. That one, I'm not sure what I think that's where that might be a shower trailer. I'm not sure what that is. They bring in shower trailers, bathroom trailers, all for the volunteers. That's a cook trailer. So they have these things. They've got like 5 different places where they're stationed around the country. And if there's a disaster in Texas, they get the ones that are nearby. This is what we call Lowe's on wheels. That's about a 48-foot semi that is full of every tool, everything you could ever imagine that they might need. So when they're going to go do chainsaw work, they have 20 chainsaws in there, so all the teams can have chainsaws. And there's a guy that's there the full time that repairs all the equipment. So when you go to a site where there's a church, the Samaritan's Purse has set up big time, and the chaplains, we go in and we're just there. Now you're going to get to see part of these workers. This particular series of slides is up in Kentucky. Nope. Let's just stop right there and I'll let you tell. This is our first deployment.
Yeah.
Go ahead and pause that if you can. This is after flooding in Kentucky. This is the first place we went to, and Samaritan's Purse hadn't really gotten there yet. And our chaplain coordinator said, we don't have teams to go out with that are doing the repairs. Go find the shelters where people have been displaced or at. Go find where FEMA's at. Just go find people. And so this was at one of the places where there were people sitting.
This was a shelter, the first place we went. And I was green because I never had been on deployment before. But a girl got up and walked past me. And you have when somebody's traumatized, there's a look that they have. And I saw her and I just knew she had been through something horrible. So I said, do you feel like talking? And she said, yeah, I do. And I said, well, let's sit down here. So we sat down and I said, why don't you tell me your story? And so mainly what we do is a lot of listening and hearing what somebody has been through can be very emotionally draining on you too.
We're not there as counselors. We're not
No.
there as therapists. They call the chaplains kind of the triage unit. We help keep them from bleeding to death until they can get some help, so to speak.
So she began to tell me her story, and she said, I went to bed. She said, I've got 2 kids. One of them's, I think, 6, and the other was 17. And she said, I told him to go to bed, and she said, I sat down on the couch, and I didn't mean to go to sleep, but I did. I fell asleep. And she said, that was about midnight. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I had a dream. And in my dream, I saw water come crashing through the window into my living room. And she said, I immediately woke up, and she said, there was no water in the living room, but suddenly water came crashing into the house through the windows. And she jumped up and she said the water was coming so fast that the doors, they couldn't get them open. So they couldn't get outside to get away from the water. Everything was flooding. Somehow her son helped her and got the door open enough that the 6-year-old could come out and be with them, but they were up to their neck in water. In the house. And she said, I don't know how to get out of here. What am I going to do? And just about that time, a water moccasin swam past her in her house. And she said, somehow we got out. And I thought, I bet you did. And I said, how? And she said, well, my 17-year-old put my 6-year-old on the shoulders and pushed her up, and she got up on the roof, and then he helped me to get out. She said, I don't know how he did it, and then he got out on the roof. And just about that time, I saw my neighbor's house come floating past, and there were 3 bodies floating with it. It was my neighbor who had 2 disabled children, and they were dead, floating in the water. And she was severely traumatized by that. And so I was able to help talk to her and take her through some of the process of sometimes just listening to somebody's story. It just helps them to unload enough until they can get somewhere where somebody can give them help. But there are steps that you can take them through to help that process. So that's what we did. That was our first deployment.
In that same deployment, the Samaritan's Purse was working on a person's house, and the owner was a gentleman, maybe 75. Because his house was all torn up, he was sitting in his car right across the street watching him, and I sat down with him. And as I was talking to him, I said, so if you've ever been to the hollers in Kentucky, which I didn't know what the hollers were, there's all these sharp canyons with a creek and some houses down there. And what happened, they knew there was going to be rain, and that's all they knew. The water rose in some of those hollers 45 feet. So this is the middle of the night, and nobody knew it was coming. It just happened. Well, I knew that several people had died in that area, and I said, now, was it like 13 people died in this area? And when I say this area, a little area. He said, yeah. I said, did you know many of those people? He said, I knew 9 of them. And I thought, this guy knew 9 people that died. And I'll say the beauty of working with this association, with the Billy Graham Association, is couplefold. One, they boldly proclaim they are not a disaster relief organization. We are a gospel organization to preach the gospel, and we use disasters as a platform to do that. And they train you how to share hope in crisis, how to share Jesus in the midst, and we end up with more people that are very, very open. When we were in Griffin, Georgia, went to this one house of an older couple. When I say older, I'm in my 70s, so when I say they're older, they're in their 80s. I mean, these are old people, not really. But as I'm talking with them, I said, so what happened? Because their carport got crushed by a tree. Their house didn't get crushed. And he said, I was here alone, but she was in town. And she said the tornado hit, and she couldn't get home. And she knew there was no way to get home. Every road she went was blocked because trees were down all over the place. And it took her a couple hours to get home, and she didn't know if her husband was alive. All the power lines and everything were down. And he was there. He was okay. And I was able to, as we talked with him and they told the story, I said, so, sir, have you considered what would have happened if that tree that hit the carport would have landed right here and you wouldn't have made it? He said, yeah. I said, what do you think would have happened to you? He said, well, I hope I would have gone to heaven. And I said, ma'am, now, if one of those trees that fell across the road would have landed on your car, did you think about what might have happened to you? She said, yeah. And I said, what do you think would have happened? She said, well, I hope I would have gone to heaven. And I love it when people say that. I said, well, would you like to change that hope into knowing? I said, it's kind of a scary thing to know you're facing eternity and don't really know where you're going to go. Well, we ended up leading both of them to the Lord. And so that was great. One of my favorite stories, we've got lots of favorite stories. We'll get to Maui here. You can go ahead and run the slides. Was we were down in Fort Myers, and one of the jobs of the chaplains, I think that deployment went for 2 or 3 months. We only go for a week at a time. And what happens is when they work on somebody's house, and the team finishes working on their house, the team, they give them the people, the homeowner, they give them a nice leather Bible. And all the team signs it and writes a little note. And then they present it to the homeowner at the end of the job. Well, many times the homeowners aren't there when they finish the job because they're not living in their house has been destroyed, they're staying with mom in another town. So chaplains, we end up having to deliver Bibles that might have been from a job that was done weeks before. So we're in Fort Myers, and if you've ever been there, it's spread out forever. And we got the GPS, and we're going to see, like Terry. I don't know if Terry is a man or a woman. We're going to see Terry at such and such an address. And our GPS, we're going all through all these streets, and our GPS says, you've arrived. And we look, and there's a guy about 35 standing in the driveway on a cane. Looks like a former military sort of guy. He's standing there. And so we get out of the car and walk up. I said, hi, are you Terry? He said, no. I said, is this such and such address? He said, no. I said, did some people in orange shirts come and work on your house? He said, no, they did that next door. And he had an MIA POW flag hanging out side of the house. And my wife said, so you were an MIA POW? He said, yeah. I said, how'd you get out? What happened? And he was telling the story, and he was on a cane. And he said, I said, so what happened? He said, well, I got, I think he was with military intelligence, was deployed with like a SEAL team, and he said my last drop, my main chute didn't open, and I did all this damage to myself. He said, I'm having surgery. Now the whole time this is going on, I'm the talker and she's quiet. The Lord's speaking to her, but I don't take a breath when I'm talking to people. I just keep going. And she's wanting to interject something, and I'm just going. And I'm not taking cues like, oh, she wants to say something. I'm just going. So tell them what the Lord is telling you.
Well, the Lord kept telling me, ask him if he knows me. And I said, okay, Lord, just as soon as Mike gives me a chance, I will.
So the Lord said that to her about 3 times, and
Yeah.
I said, can I pray for you for your upcoming surgery? He said, yeah, I'd like that. So I prayed for him and said, amen, and Sharon thought, it's all over now. I've got to say something.
You know how that moment just seems to pass? And then it's going to be awkward and kind of like well, I should have done it, but now I didn't do it. And the Lord said, ask him if he knows me. And I said, okay. And I blurted out, do you know God? And I thought, that's not how I meant to say that. And I said, do you know God? Twice I said it like that.
And then he looked at us, he said, funny you should ask that. He said, I've been looking for him. He said, I'm about 75, 70, 80% there. He said, I'm almost there. And again, it was one of those wonderful moments. I said, would you like to go that other 20%? He said, yes, I would. So our GPS led us to the wrong house, said you've arrived. We went and talked to the wrong guy, led him to the Lord. He was he was 70, 75% there. he was, when I say ripe fruit on the tree, he was ripe. And then we went next door. They weren't home. But the way God can orchestrate, just like I said that in El Gato Gordo, how he can get somebody from here and here and all meet in one restaurant. He does that all the time in these situations. You go, this is just amazing. So then, okay, yeah, well, go ahead and run these. I haven't been watching to see what's going on. So these are, you'll see my wife all the time praying with people. I never pray with people. No, she doesn't take pictures of me. I see her praying and I take a picture. I said, did you get that picture? I was praying with those people. She said, oh, I didn't think about that. So I think there's one and all that. This is in Hawaii. Now we got deployed to Maui. When the fires took place on Maui, as I said, we were apartment managers in Lahaina, the town that burned down. And when the fires took place, I contacted the Billy Graham Association, and I said, if you guys send people to Maui, we've lived there. It's been like 35, 40 years ago. I said, we've lived there. We have friends there. We'd love to go. Well, these are some of our friends. Well, never mind. Those were some of our friends from Maui that were beating each other with tools. That's what friends do. They pose for pictures. But so we got deployed to Maui, and right before we left, we had our church here in Cleveland pray for us, and they had shut down the city completely because probably at least 90%, how many of you have ever been to Lahaina? Anybody? Well, about 90% of the entire town is gone. It's gone. Like the Pioneer Inn, that huge, big wooden hotel, all that's left there is the big anchor. I've got a picture of just the anchor out front of the Pioneer Inn. So they had shut down the city because what was left there, every structure that was left, they had busted in the doors. The police and fire department had busted in the doors to make sure that nobody was in there. So the town, what was left in the town was not secured in any way, shape, or form. And there was the asbestos from the old wooden buildings. Treated lumber turns to arsenic, we found when it burns. They had 90-some people burned to death, and we got more stories that we were very ready to leave because of just the trauma that we went through hearing these stories of people. So our church prayed for us, and we said they're not letting people in the city yet. And our pastor prayed for us, and he said, I believe the Lord's given me a word. You have
full access.
He says you'll have full access. So like the first day we're in a rental car, we go up, the National Guard are at all these different places, and we said we'd like to go in. They said you can't go in. I thought, well, that's not full access. So they turned us down. Well, a couple days later, somebody called us and said, oh, somebody's going in there, not one of our people at all. And we called our chaplain leader because they weren't letting anybody in the city. They called our chaplain, we called our chaplain leader and said, hey, they said somebody's going in. They said, well, go to the gate. We've got a sticker on our door that says Billy Graham Association. We're wearing these pretty shirts. And went to one of the gates, and I said, we think we've got some people in there. He said, go ahead. Now, the day before, they don't let people in. When our team finally went in, it took 45 minutes for them to get checked to go through. But we went in. We were one of the only cars in the whole city. We drove all around the city of Lahaina, and it was burned so badly, we couldn't figure out where we were because every landmark was gone. You'll see pictures. This is our team in Hawaii here. But the town was completely devastated. What I have right back here, there's going to be a picture that'll come up. We went to a fireman's house. This is a piece of the windshield of his car. It got over 3,500 degrees, melted the windshield. You can touch this, but it's real brittle. Be careful. And there should be pictures up here of the aluminum wheels on cars just melted, and there were puddles all around all the cars. There was a hurricane about, I think, 500 miles away. They were getting the 80, 90, 100 mile an hour winds. Yeah, this is the town of Lahaina right there. Hold that picture for a second. If you know anything about Lahaina, that's downtown Lahaina. That's what's left of downtown Lahaina. And I don't know if you can see it on those pictures, but if one of the pictures comes up where you see big puddles of aluminum, stop it on that, because the wheels just melted, the radiators melted, the transmissions melted, because you had 100 mile an hour winds. And this is the apartment complex we used to live in. That's a 2-story complex that now is not there. So yeah, this is, in fact, hold that one for a second. If you look real closely, you have to study it. There's the big anchor. That's the Pioneer Inn. If you remember the great big block-long wooden building, that's the block-long wooden building. There's an anchor out front of it. You can just let those roll. So anyhow, we got access. We drove all over the city. We drove around, and we kept thinking, we thought the police were going to get us. Somebody was going to get us. We just drove around taking pictures. This was the fireman's house where this windshield came off of. In fact, pause that one for a second. The unique thing about the fires in Lahaina was that this man was the retired fire chief. He'd been retired for about 6 months. That's his retirement home, and you see the grass behind it. He had about 100-foot circle around his house of grass because he was a fireman, and he knew fires come across grass. So he built that house there and had that all around him. And if you look in the far background, you see a neighborhood. Well, he and his friend were there getting stuff out of their house. And the fire was not on the block where you can see. The fire was the next block over. So they thought they had time. The fire was the next block over. They're getting stuff out of their house. And he said the winds were so strong, the flames would lay down and shake, and then they would jump up. And he said they would jump like a wave. It completely jumped the next row of houses jumped over that grass and landed on his house. He and his buddy both jumped in their cars to take off. He got in his car, which I don't know if you can go ahead and let him roll. He got in his car, and his car wouldn't start. And he went to get out of his car door, and the car next to him was on fire, so he couldn't get out of his car. So he had to get out of his passenger side door, a smaller car with a center console. None of the electronics wouldn't work in his car. He had to bust the window out. He climbed out the window, and he'd taken his glove off to work the controls. When he hit the ground, he burned his hand really bad. He said the flames were laying down at about 90 miles an hour, about 8 feet off the ground, and he belly crawled several hundred feet to where he got out from underneath the flames. There, stop that one for a second. That's the windshield that piece of glass came off of. That is the car that he couldn't get out of. And I asked him, I said, could I have a piece of that glass? People won't believe how hot it actually got. And that's his windshield. Well,
Let me say something about the team that went in. We went in to sit with the owner, while the team went in to sift through the ashes. And the point is, you're trying to find anything that they can save. And the team that went in there found his badge from when he was a fireman. And he was just blown away. He was so thrilled for that.
He would actually go with the team lead with those little yard flags, the little wire flags, and they'd walk around the ashes. Yes, stop that one. There you can see the puddles of aluminum. Those are next to the wheels, that's the melted wheels on the car. That's how hot it was. But they would put the little flags. He'd say, well, over here I think is where my wife's dining room the silverware was. Over here, and they put about a dozen flags around. Then they go in literally with those little boxes and sift through that stuff, wearing masks, respirators, full Tyvek suits because of all the hazardous stuff that's in there. Well, Anyhow, he went one way, his friend with the dog went another way when he got to their meeting place. Those are the people in the Tyvek suits working through the debris. He got to their meeting place and his friend wasn't there. And he thought, oh no, and they couldn't go right back in because the fires were raging. The next day, this is our apartment complex we used to live in. The next day, he went and he didn't see his friend's car there. He thought, oh, he must have gone some other place. He's okay, the car wasn't there. He looked, and about 150 feet away from the house was the car, all burned up with his friend and his dog. And
He had to carry his friend out.
He said, I bagged him. I said, you bagged your friend? He said, I wasn't going to have somebody else do that. And, so the trauma that people went through is incredible. So we got all kinds of stories here.
I know, we're taking too much time.
We are taking too much time. So let me tell a couple more about Maui, then I'll tell you how you can get involved and what you can do. Because first of all, let me just say, Samaritan's Purse needs volunteers all the time. You can go to, if you just Google search Samaritan's Purse, you saw pictures in here. There's the one picture she got of me praying with somebody. That's the only one in recorded history. Samaritan's Purse takes volunteers of all ages. You saw one picture of an elderly gentleman carrying a log. Now, you don't have to carry logs. They always say, if you don't want to go up on the roof, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. But if you want to work, you can work. And some of it's hot, some of it's heavy, all of it is rewarding. And people choose what they want to do and don't want to do. If you don't want to run a chainsaw, if you don't want to get on a roof, they say you don't have to. And it's so good, they say your number one job is the homeowner. The task is getting the roof done. The job is the homeowner. And so Samaritan's Purse people, they'll sit down. They said, if you feel like talking to a homeowner, if they want to talk. Forget putting the tarp on the roof. Talk with them because they're an evangelistic association. And, they want you to do that. So I encourage you to volunteer. What they'll do is they'll send you out a notice saying we need people in Fort Myers, we need people in Kentucky, we need people here or there. You can respond or not respond. You can go for a week, you can go for a month, you can go for as long as you want, you can go for a couple days. But I want to encourage you, this is the one thing after doing this, I thought we really missed it when we were pastoring. We didn't know about Samaritan. We knew of it. We knew of Samaritan's Purse, but we didn't know what all they were doing. And we didn't have any idea of the, how valuable. The volunteers are all thrilled. They're worn out and they're thrilled. And if you don't want to get dirty, you want to wear a blue shirt. Go. Sometimes I feel really bad sometimes. We walk up on a job site and I don't know if you keep those scrolling. I don't know if you scrolled through the picture of the people totally covered in mud. That was up in Kentucky because people's houses got flooded and the insulation under the house is all wet. So they would go in, this is the one, they go in through the crawl space and in the Tyvek because they don't know what kind of hazardous materials are out there. They got headlights on because it's dark. They said, be careful where you reach. There can be snakes in here. I thought, oh, am I glad I'm wearing a blue shirt, not a white Tyvek. And it was like 95 degrees. I don't know what it was. They were climbing in. This is that crew all covered in mud because that's climbing in that little crawl space under house, pulling out wet insulation and dragging it out.
But the thing is, it's so rewarding.
Oh.
These people go back over and over and over. That you can't say how it makes you feel on the inside when you see the ministry that it does for people. And I want to tell one story about a lady in Fort Myers who was highly suspicious.
Oh.
She thought that surely they were after something, they wanted money. And so when Samaritan's Purse goes in, they're just there to help.
They don't charge a dime.
They don't charge a dime. They just want to help. And she didn't believe it. Well, we come a little bit after they have arrived, and they introduce us to the homeowner. And so then we sit and talk to the homeowner. She wanted nothing to do with us, absolutely nothing. So we greeted her and left because she didn't want anything to do. She didn't trust anybody. So we went back the next day, and she was still pretty standoffish. We went back the next day, and Samaritan's Purse was there all week long working on her house, not asking for a dime, just
singing
helping
songs,
her.
being happy, joking with each other. Yeah.
And her heart was changing. And by the end of the week, she was praying with one of the Samaritan's Purse workers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are incredible opportunities that, yeah, we've led many, many people to the Lord. We've prayed with all kinds of people. I mean, you get stories, the Lahaina stories, if you want those. They were very traumatic. In fact, they were so traumatic, we were there 2 weeks, I thought, I'm going to be glad when this one's done. Yeah. And the last Sunday, we went with some friends across the island to go to church. Wearing these shirts, we went to a big church in Kahului, and after the church, one of the pastors at the door, he said, "Oh, what are you guys doing?" I said, "Well, we've been over in Lahaina sifting through ashes," and he paused, he looked, he said, "My aunt and uncle are in those ashes." I just thought, oh. So then we get on the airplane, and I'm seated next to a guy. I said, "What's going on with you?" He said, I'm flying to South America. He said, "My good friend got burned up, and I got to get out of here." So the people, I mean, the stories never seem to end. But God uses you to step into somebody's life and be a little, every now and then we'll get a call from one of these towns. Somebody still has our cell phone. They'll say, "How are you doing? This is going on." Very, very rewarding. Very rewarding. So please pray for Samaritan's Church, Samaritan's Purse. Pray for us as chaplains and the other chaplains. That's so critical. You can get involved. You can go yourself if you want to, get some chaplaincy training. They'll do that. Like I said, there's a lot of the chaplains don't have any pastoral background. They just got a heart. They'll train you. When we were in Texas, we worked with a couple that they weren't pastoral at all. That was their first time deployed. They put me with the husband, put her with the wife, and we, did some hands-on training with them. So you can do that. You can always give to Samaritan's Purse. You can give and support them. They're one last story. There's never a last story. You know what it means when a preacher says in closing? Nothing. It means absolutely nothing. So down in Livingston, Texas, just a couple weeks ago, there was a Hispanic couple that their house, they had bought the house. They'd been there for about 6 years. They had done remodeling. It was painted. They'd taken good care of the house. 6 months prior, they had redone the foundation under the house. It was, on short poles, with blocks and poles. They'd redone all that. And the floods came through and washed under their house and washed so much of the foundation. The house had twisted. The house was uneven. And Samaritan's Purse was in there working on the house. And she was very on top of things. She was calling contractors, calling all these people. 2 contractors came out, and both of them said, "There's nothing we can do. We can't repair this. The whole house is shifted. We can't re-secure it. We're not going to be able to do it." She told the Samaritan's Purse people, "Don't come back. Go work on somebody else's house that they'll be able to benefit more, because we're not going to be able to keep this." They kept working. She actually said she wanted to give money. They said, "We don't want your money." She gave them money. Well, then the last day we were there, we heard that there was going to be a special guest coming to camp, which is typically one of the Grahams. Now, Franklin has two sons and a daughter that work with the organization. I don't know which one came. Edward. So Edward came, and we didn't know what he was going to do. We didn't know anything about it, but he went out to that house. We weren't there. We had prayed with the lady, met the lady, nice Christian lady. They both worked full time. They were responsible people, and she was just, God's going to take care of us. Well, he went out there, and their son came running up to him and hugged him. I mean, they had a son that was a hugger, and he hugged us when we came up, and he hugged Will, and Will commented about that. Then he walked through the house and saw the destruction in the house. And he said to the lady, "Now, do you own this house?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "You own the house? About all this land?" She said, "Yeah, I own the land too." He said, "Here's what we're going to do for you. We're going to build you a new house. Wow. And we're going to put you up somewhere until the house is done. If for some reason we can't build on this site, we'll buy you a piece of property and we'll build you a house." And then he found out the mother-in-law lived with him. He said, "She lives with you?" He said, "We're going to build you a bigger house." And that's the kind of thing that Samaritan's Purse does. That'll never make media. I mean, we were there when that happened. And they'll rebuild the house. In Mayfield, Kentucky, the place that I told you that I told you I wasn't going to finish with one story. I got into a second story. I knew that would happen. Anyhow, they found out that a lot of the people that lost their homes were home renters. And the rental homes weren't going to be rebuilt because the people didn't have insurance on them. The Samaritan's Purse organization bought a 100-acre parcel of land, divided it and developed it into 100 one-acre lots, and they're building 100 houses and giving them to the people. all with storm shelters. And last I knew, this was a year and a half, they built about 8 of them, and they had videos of them giving people the deed to their own house that they'd never owned before. So thank you for letting us ramble on for far more than our amounted time. If you want to hear more stories, we can tell stories all night long for sure. We can do that. We're blessed to be here. We're thrilled to be able to do this. We go out as we can go out. We're not full time. We are volunteers. Oh, by the way, if you become a chaplain or your Samaritan's Purse, you pay your way to get to the site. Once you get there, you'll stay in. You bring your own sleeping bag and a cot or something. You'll stay in a room. They'll feed you. They'll take care of you all while you're there. Then you make your own way home. So it's at your expense, but they take care of you while you're there, and it's well worth it. All righty.